Okay, let's unpack this. International law asserts that seeking asylum is a fundamental human right. It seems clear enough.
It does, on paper.
Yet, recent policy shifts have led many to question whether America is, actually upholding this principle at its border.
That's the core tension we're seeing.
So today, we're diving deep into the sources you've shared. We want to understand the recent restrictions, the human experiences they describe.
And the role of these digital systems, too.
Exactly. And what these developments suggest about America's legal and, frankly, moral standing globally.
Our mission is to distill the key insights, giving you a clear, well-rounded picture of this really complex issue.
To truly grasp the current landscape, we have to start at the foundation. What precisely does international law articulate regarding the right to seek asylum? Because the sources suggest there's a significant framework in place.
There absolutely is, and it's a powerful irony, really.
Yeah.
The very international laws being cited now, America largely helped write them.
Right after World War II.
Exactly. Driven by the failures to protect Jewish refugees during the Holocaust, the U.S. spearheaded the creation of these foundational human rights documents.
So like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
Yes, Article 14 specifically, and also the 1951 Refugee Convention. Both enshrine the right to seek asylum.
And there's a core principle in there, non-something.
Non-refoulement.
Yeah.
It's absolutely core, non-negotiable, considered customary international law, so it binds all nations.
And that means?
It means no country can return individuals to places where their lives or freedom would be threatened, period.
Okay. That seems unambiguous.
It is. And what's also critical, often overlooked, is Article 31 of the Refugee Convention.
What does that cover?
It states that countries cannot impose penalties on refugees who enter irregularly, maybe without documents, if they present themselves without delay to authorities.
Interesting. So crossing without prior authorization isn't necessarily grounds for penalty if you're seeking asylum immediately.
Correct. And beyond these, you have protections through the Convention Against Torture and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. These require due process, essentially, the right to a fair legal process before you're sent back to potential danger.
That's a powerful historical context. Our nation helped build this framework. So given these bedrock principles, how do our sources explain the dramatic policy shifts we've seen at the U.S. border in recent years? It seems like a complete turnaround.
Well, the sources point to a really significant shift, starting with former President Trump's proclamation 10888. That was January 20th, 2025.
And that proclamation did what, exactly?
It sought to indefinitely suspend asylum processing at the southern border. The administration framed it as a response to what it termed an invasion.
Strong language. How did the courts react?
Federal Judge Randolph Moss, as cited in our materials, called the actions unprecedented. He ruled the president couldn't just unilaterally create an alternative immigration system that bypassed existing laws and international obligations.
So the courts pushed back.
They did. Federal courts eventually blocked the ban by July 2025. But the initial impact was substantial. The signal it sent was huge.
And then under President Biden, did things revert back?
Not entirely. Policies continue to evolve. Our sources point to executive orders in June 2024. That one suspended asylum when daily border encounters went over 2,500.
Okay.
Then it got tightened further in September 2024, requiring 28 consecutive days below 1,500 encounters before asylum processing could resume.
That sounds like a very high bar to clear consistently.
It is. And then there's the Circumvention of Lawful Pathways rule from May 2023. This is key.
What did that rule do?
It generally made people ineligible for asylum if they hadn't first used the government's app, CBP One, to get an appointment, or if they hadn't already applied for and been denied asylum in a third country they traveled through.
So basically pushing the responsibility onto Mexico or other countries.
Effectively, yes. It channeled asylum seekers towards specific, limited pathways, primarily the app.
And how did organizations react? The sources mention the IRC.
Right, the International Rescue Committee. They and others were quite vocal. Their statements in our sources characterized Biden's policies as violating American laws and values. They saw it as undermining the established right to seek asylum.
So given these policy shifts, let's explore the reality on the ground. What does it actually look like for asylum seekers trying to navigate this, especially with tools like the CBP One app?
Our sources paint a pretty grim picture. They describe the CBP One app as a significant digital barrier. Many people call it the CBP One nightmare.
A nightmare. Why?
Well, think about it. It offered only 1,450 appointments daily. That's across 8 different ports of entry for potentially hundreds of thousands of people waiting.
That math doesn't add up. The demand must have vastly outstripped supply.
Exactly. This scarcity led to average waits of 2 to 3 months, but often it stretched over a year. People were stuck in dangerous conditions just waiting for a slot.
And were there technical issues too?
Oh, absolutely. Beyond just the lack of appointments, the app itself had numerous hurdles. Frequent crashes, confusing fraud-detected errors.
Which must have been terrifying if your life depends on it.
Immensely stressful. Plus, the basic requirements. You needed a smartphone, reliable internet access, things many fleeing persecutions simply don't have. And the language options were limited, mostly English, Spanish, Haitian Creole.
So it created huge access barriers.
Definitely. One source notes it became like a lottery based on chance. Amnesty International stated it raised serious questions about adhering to international law.
Are there specific stories in the sources?
Yes, like Anna. Fleeing violence in Michoacan, Mexico, she reportedly tried for over a year to get an appointment for her family. Logged in every single day. No success.
A year of trying daily.
And then, remember, Trump's January 2025 proclamation, it didn't just pause future asylum claims, it canceled all 30,000 existing CBP One appointments.
Yeah. So people who had waited months maybe finally got an appointment.
Gone. Instantly. There's an account of a Venezuelan man who had waited 8 months, finally got an appointment for the very next day, and then it was just canceled. Imagine the despair.
It's devastating. And it really drives home that behind every policy are individual lives, individual stories.
Absolutely.
Our sources include some powerful narratives about who these individuals are, what they're fleeing. What do these stories tell us?
They're truly harrowing. They put a human face on the statistics.
Yeah.
Our sources share the experience of Maria from Honduras. Gang members murdered her family members. She fled to Mexico.
Okay.
But waiting for that elusive asylum appointment in Mexico became impossible, dangerous. So she made an agonizing choice. Send her 6-year-old daughter, Lucy, across the border alone. As an unaccompanied minor,
She felt that was safer.
she saw it as Lucy's only possible path to safety. An impossible decision for a parent.
Unimaginable. Any others?
We also hear from Benjamin, from El Salvador.
Yeah.
Targeted by gangs, severely beaten because he refused to join them. He explicitly stated he would not survive if he were sent back.
Just stark survival.
Yes. And another account describes Jimena, just 21, from Honduras. Raped by gang members who then murdered her cousin as warning. She fled while pregnant, actually gave birth near the border.
While pregnant.
Yes. And she expressed profound fear, believing she and her newborn child would be killed if they returned.
These aren't abstract threats.
Not at all. There's also Sergio, Romina, and their 8-year-old son, Antonio, fled Honduras after a machete attack. Romina was described as still deeply traumatized. These accounts really underscore that for so many, this isn't about economics. It's about escaping extreme violence, mandatory gang recruitment, things rampant in El Salvador, Honduras, Guatemala. It's a desperate flight for survival.
So when these pathways, these legal routes to asylum are curtailed or closed off, what actually happens to these individuals and families? Where do they go? The sources must touch on this.
They do, and it's often not a safe outcome. Our sources detail a dire situation for those stranded in Mexican border cities. These places are described as among the most dangerous globally.
Dangerous how?
Doctors Without Borders, for example, reported treating over 700 survivors of sexual violence just in their Mexico projects in 2024. The International Rescue Committee did an assessment.
Yes.
Their findings in our sources show 26% of displaced people they surveyed in Mexico have been kidnapped at least once, often multiple times. Cartels run rampant with extortion, kidnapping, violence.
So they escape danger in their home country only to face it again while waiting?
Precisely. Shelters are overwhelmed, forcing families into tents on the street. This exposes children to potential gang recruitment, women to increased risks of trafficking.
It sounds like a trap.
It is. As one asylum seeker in Tijuana is quoted in our materials, we're in exactly the same conditions that people are fleeing from. It's a tragic cycle of danger.
Now, there's a common argument you hear, often from politicians. Stricter, even harsher policies at the border enhance national security. They deter crossings. What do the sources tell us about that idea? Does cruelty actually work as a deterrent or security measure?
The sources strongly challenge that notion. They indicate that closing off legal pathways doesn't actually stop people fleeing for their lives from coming.
So what happens instead?
It often redirects them towards more perilous route, deeper into the shadows, increasing their reliance on smugglers' coyotes.
And that has consequences.
Deadly ones. Tragically, this has led to a significant increase in deaths. Over 650 migrants were reported to have died crossing the southern border in 2024 alone. The data provided calls it the deadliest year on record.
So the policy intended to control the border might actually be making it more lethal.
That's the implication. Furthermore, the sources suggest that cartels can actually profit from these restrictive U.S. policies.
How so?
When legal avenues are blocked, desperate asylum seekers become, essentially, customers for smugglers. They become victims of extortion and protection rackets run by these criminal organizations. The policy inadvertently funds the very groups it might claim to be fighting.
That's a disturbing feedback loop.
It is. The perspective presented in these materials is that genuine border security actually comes from orderly, efficient processing, not from creating chaos and desperation.
Because if people can seek asylum legally.
The need for smugglers diminishes significantly, and authorities have clearer oversight of who is entering. Order versus chaos.
Okay, so if these current restrictive policies aren't achieving their stated goals and might even be creating more danger and empowering cartels, what do our sources propose as better alternatives? More effective, maybe more humane approaches? Have we handled things differently before?
Yes, the sources do put forward several concrete solutions, often advocating for a return to established lawful processes.
Such as?
Things like restoring asylum processing at all ports of entry, not just limiting it. Significantly funding the immigration courts to clear the massive backlogs, allowing for quick and fair processing.
So efficiency and fairness together.
Exactly. Ensuring access to legal representation for asylum seekers, which dramatically impacts outcomes. Creating genuinely safe and orderly pathways that don't depend on winning a technological lottery, like the CBP One app sometimes felt like.
Makes sense.
Anything else. And also, crucially, addressing the root causes. Why are people fleeing in the first place? Investing in sustained development aid and stability programs in our home countries?
And historically, have we managed large influxes before?
Absolutely. The sources remind us the U.S. has proven its capacity. Think back to the 1980s. We successfully processed hundreds of thousands of refugees from Southeast Asia after the Vietnam War.
Right.
We've also welcomed significant numbers of Cubans, Soviets during the Cold War, Bosnians fleeing genocide. We have done this.
And how do we compare to other countries now?
The data in our sources is quite illuminating here. Turkey currently hosts around 3.6 million refugees. Colombia has taken in about 2.5 million Venezuelans. Jordan, a small country of only 10 million people, hosts 750,000 refugees.
Wow. That puts things in perspective.
It does. It suggests the issue isn't necessarily a lack of capacity in the U.S., but perhaps, as the sources imply, more a question of political will to implement these proven humane strategies.
And organizations are working on this?
Yes. Groups like the American Human Rights Initiative Foundation, mentioned in our materials, are actively documenting these policy impacts, reporting violations to UN human rights bodies, and advocating legally to prohibit future executive actions that suspend asylum rights.
This deep dive, then, it really goes beyond just policy debates and legal statutes, doesn't it? It seems to touch on fundamental questions about our national identity. You know, the Statue of Liberty still stands there, but what do our actions at the border suggest about the promise she represents today?
That is a profound question, and it's woven through the sources. They consistently emphasize that the principle of non-refoulement, that cornerstone we discussed, remains a foundational aspect of international law. It's not optional.
And the UN has weighed in.
Yes. The United Nations, as reported in these materials, has repeatedly stated that certain U.S. asylum policies appear to violate international law. The core message often boils down to a call for the U.S. to simply uphold its own laws, its own treaties, its historical commitments.
And other countries manage.
The sources highlight that other developed nations do manage to process asylum seekers, sometimes in large numbers, without suspending fundamental international legal obligations. The question implicitly asked is, why can't the U.S.?
And it always comes back to the individuals.
Always. The sources bring it back to people like Wendy Lopez and her family. They won their asylum case, but then had their status revoked while awaiting an appeal, facing deportation back to the danger they fled.
Just devastating uncertainty.
Or Javier, fleeing extortion in El Salvador. He got separated from the legal process, faced deportation without a lawyer, describing it as a lost cause, with potentially fatal consequences for him and his family back home.
So the stakes are incredibly high.
Immense. The broader implication articulated in these sources is stark. Denying asylum to those genuinely fleeing violence can be seen as making us complicit in their suffering. Separating families seeking safety makes us the danger.
And violating international law has consequences, too.
It erodes moral authority. We don't uphold these standards, How can we credibly condemn other nations who violate human rights?
As we wrap up, it seems the sources leave us with a choice to consider. What does this approach to asylum mean for who we are as a nation, our identity, our place in the world?
If the very act of seeking safety, a recognized human right, becomes treated like a crime, what values are we actually protecting?
It's a powerful question to reflect on. We encourage you to delve further into these topics.
Absolutely.
You can learn more about the American Human Rights Initiative Foundation and explore ways to support their work documenting these issues and advocating for change. Their website is AmericanHumanRightsInitiativeFoundation.org.
That's AmericanHumanRightsInitiativeFoundation.org.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the source material.